In this video, we will be looking at what is existentialism. It is important for us to understand this concept, which is a philosophical one and not a psychological one, to understand the works of Frankl, as Frankl's work fall under the school of existentialism, which is a school, or rather a philosophy, that looks at life in a matter-of-fact manner. So, what is existentialism? Existentialism is the philosophy that places emphasis on individual existence, freedom, choice, and individuals' emotions, actions, responsibilities, and thoughts, or the meaning or purpose of life. Because there is so much diversity in the philosophy of existentialism, a concrete definition is hard to put down. What it means is that because it encompasses such a wide area with regards to life, basically individual existence, freedoms and choice, and the ultimate core value of finding purpose or meaning in life, it is difficult to define it in a narrow manner, because as a philosophy itself, it tries to encompass everything that makes an individual's life count, or what it means to live. And thus it is hard to give a single definition to what existentialism means. So what are a few characteristics of existentialism? It does not deny the validity of the basic categories of physics, psychology, biology, and other sciences. What it basically says is that we cannot be understood in terms of these things alone. And what is interesting is it gives a blank slate, or tabula rasa, so to speak, in that we have no model, a blueprint, or an ideal essence, or a perfect nature. So nobody can determine or tell us what is right or what is wrong. We define that. So we must forge our own values and meanings from existing in an inherently meaningless or an absurd world. Another characteristic of existentialism is the belief that humans do have free will. This means we have the ability to choose what we want, what we don't want, the ability to define what our essence is, or to define who I am as an individual or as a human being. It means that in our existence, we are constantly faced with choices, and we cannot escape from this choice. Trying to escape from the choice itself is a choice. So existentialism does not in any sense say that you have the ability to be without doing anything, because even being without doing anything is in itself making a choice to do nothing. So let's take a look at the underlying concepts of existentialism. Human free will. We spoke about this in our definition. Human nature is chosen through life choices. This is the freedom of choice, the ability to choose. A person is best when struggling against their individual nature, fighting for life. What this means is that when we try to identify, or when we try to realize who we are in a state of conflict with our own self, or rather with an already given definition of who we are. It is during this point of conflict that we truly derive the meaning of who we are, or in a sense the essence of our own humanity as an individual. The identity of I is built only when we decide to struggle with our already given meaning. As according to this philosophy, the meaning of an individual is an ongoing process, one that we keep defining throughout our life. Next, decisions are not without stress and consequence. There are things that are not rational. Personal responsibility and discipline is crucial. Society is unnatural, and its traditional religious and secular rules are arbitrary. Worldly desire is futile. What needs to be understood is that this philosophy is an all-inclusive one, and it is open to both the theist and the atheist. And it is one which says that though religious and secular rules are arbitrary, that a person may define themselves based on these, as we will see later. Existentialism is not about wealth, pleasure, or honor, and it goes to say that this is not what makes a good life, but a good life is deriving meaning of who we are. social values and structures that control the individual, because these already define who an individual may be. But according to existentialism, we are supposed to define our own self despite or irrespective of all these social structures and values, such as the religious construct. Accept what is, and that is enough in life. Similar to the previous point, it basically goes on to say that what is currently is not what reality is. Reality is what we make it to be. Science can and will make everything better. People are basically good but ruined by society or external forces. Now, this point highlights the fact that human beings are determined by something else, or deterministic in nature. But existentialism clearly says that we have the locus of control. An individual has the locus of control irrespective of external forces. And whether we choose to be good or bad is finally an individual's choice. I want my way now, or it's not my fault mentality. Because ultimately, who we choose to be is our own choice, according to this philosophy. So how did existentialism come about? The emergence of existentialism can be traced back to philosophers such as Buddha, Plato, Socrates, and they can be called the forerunners of existentialism because of their view of the world. But the modern day philosophy of existentialism can be traced back to the post-World War years following the Great Depression. Like I said, during a time the world considered it to be a very dark time. Thinkers such as Jean-Paul Sartre or Viktor Frankl, for that matter, were all individuals who were affected by the World War and tried to identify what it meant to be a human. And if we go through a few of the pictures on the slide right now, are all works that can be brought under the umbrella of existentialism, because they look at what does it mean to live, what is the meaning of life. And this is the basic essence of existentialism. Søren Kierkegaard is known as the father of existentialism because of his thoughts on life and the whole idea of anxiety, which is a common theme in existentialism, which we will look at later. And Jean-Paul Sartre is another influential thinker in the school of existentialism, whose thoughts have come to make central ideas in existentialism. So let's take a look at a few ideas given by Jean-Paul Sartre. Sartre said that a man is born into this world without a purpose or a definition, and so defines or makes his purpose or his meaning due to reactions of experiences that he experiences, and based on these experiences he builds his own definition. A definition is not given to a man's existence from the time he's born, but he makes it for himself. Hence, it is up to the individual to choose the life they think is best. And like I said, it is a philosophy that encompasses both the theist and the atheist. And so he believed that there is no God or a designer to give man a purpose in life. According to Sartre, a belief in God can only ever be a personal choice, which furthermore can and should never be forced upon another person. Though he said that there was no God, he did not deny the fact that an individual can derive meaning out of God. And one does not choose to exist. Existence is given, and one has to exist in order to choose. What this basically means is that when you are born, it's not a choice that you have, but you have the choice whether you choose to live or not to live, because that in itself is a choice. So what does it mean to be a human being? According to Sartre, human reality consists of two modes of existence, of being and of nothingness. The human being exists both as in itself an object or thing, and as for itself a consciousness. Now, this can be a bit confusing, but we will look at it given an example. So let's take a look at what objects are. So objects exist as they are, in a sense. Their physical identity or their physical presence is their existence, whereas its essence, basically the meaning of what the physical presence of a thing is. In this picture, if we look at it, we see that the image that we see takes a certain physical dimension, but we know that this is a rock, and the rock is the essence of this object. And in that sense, being in itself, by what Sartre means, is that this physical object is a rock, and that in itself, the fact that it is a rock, is a being in itself. To further clarify, when it comes to human beings, what he meant is that existence precedes and rules essence. So I, as a human being, exist physically, but my essence as to who I am does not precede my existence. I need to exist as a physical object first before I can derive my existence. And what I meant is define my essence. And what Sartre calls as being for itself is this essence that I give myself. So as human beings, we are conscious of our complete free will. And human beings have existence, but no essence, except for what we make for ourselves. This is what I've been explaining about. And it is that we are the ones who derive a sense of essence to our physical existence. So the end result, according to Sartre, is that entire responsibility of who we are falls on ourselves, because we are the people who give meaning to our physical presence. So your existence precedes your essence, because physically you exist first, and following that you give your physical existence a meaning which is called essence. What are the themes of existentialism? The biggest theme is the idea of choice. We've been talking about it and we've seen it before. It is the ability to choose, and this is the primary distinction of humanity, which differs us from everything else in the world. The ability that we have to choose and the freedom to do so. Existentialists have held that human beings do not have a fixed nature or essence, as other animals and plants do. Each human being makes their choice that creates his or her own nature. So, in relation to choice, what it means is that a man is a conscious subject, not a thing to be predicted or manipulated, because he has a freedom to choose. And existentialism says, I am nothing else but my own conscious existence, meaning I am nothing but the product of my choices. The next theme, if you see, as this picture shows, the famous picture by Man Ray, is a sense of anxiety or a sense of anguish, which is something that Søren Kierkegaard spoke a lot about. And what he means by anxiety is a generalized uneasiness, a fear or dread, which is not directed to any specific object. Anguish is the dread of the nothingness of human existence. So what he's trying to talk about is the anguish or the sense of anxiety we get from the realization that there is nothing to our surroundings. There's no meaning to our surroundings except for that meaning that we give it. And because of that, the amount of responsibility an individual has upon themselves to make a certain choice, along with it comes a certain sense of anxiety, because ultimately the entire responsibility is on you. According to Kierkegaard, it is the claim that anguish is the underlying, all-pervasive, universal condition of human existence, the state in which a being is aware of its possible non-being. Anxiety stems from our understanding and recognition of the total freedom of choice that confronts us every moment, and the individual's confrontation with nothingness. Angst, which is the actual word used by Kierkegaard, is a derivation of anxiety or sense of anguish, which means fear or anxiety. It's a negative feeling arising from the experience of human freedom and responsibility. Kierkegaard used the word angst in common Danish angst, which means dread, directly translation, to describe a profound and deep-seated spiritual condition of insecurity and fear in the free human being. Absurdity. This is another theme that we see in existentialism. It is the view that each of us is simply here, thrown into this time and space with no apparent reason or purpose. Man's futile search for meaning, unity, and clarity in the face of an unintelligible world devoid of God and eternal truths or values. So, if you look at it, honestly, life seems absurd, and that's why it's called absurdity. Absurdum, the belief that nothing can explain or rationalize human existence. There is no answer to why I am. Humans exist in a meaningless, irrational universe, and any search for order will bring them into direct conflict with this universe. And this conflict is where an individual will experience a sense of anxiety or angst. Looking at this picture, what we're trying to derive is another theme common in existentialism, which is nothingness or the void. Nothingness or the void. If no essence defines me, and if then as an existentialist I reject all of the philosophies, sciences, political theories and religions which fail to reflect my existence as a conscious being, and attempt to impose a specific essentialist structure upon me and my world, then there is nothing that structures my world. And if you just reread what I just read out, you would realize that there's a sense of nothingness, there's a void, because nothing can explain who I am. So what it says is that my existence is actually a nothingness. Like Sartre said, you exist as a physical object, and it's nothing unless you give yourself some meaning, which is existence. So your own existence is actually nothingness until you give your nothingness a sense of meaning, which gives you a sense of essence. Death is another common theme that we can see in relation to existentialism, and it kind of ties in with nothingness or the void, because existentialism looks at all aspects of life. Death is one that they also pay a lot of attention to. What it means is that in this world that has no meaning, death is always there and there's no escaping from it. And when you think about death, if you haven't given your existence any meaning, then it creates a sense of anxiety. And an extension of it is that this anxiety will lead you to make a choice or to make meaning of your existence. So death is inevitable to all. And according to Sartre, death is only another witness to the absurdity of human existence. And Camus, who's another famous existentialist, said that suicide was the rejection of freedom. What he's trying to say is that it's only if we exist that we have the freedom to choose. Though our own existence, like I spoke before, is not a choice of our own, it's only in existing that we have the freedom to exercise our right to choice. And committing suicide, for that matter, according to him, is denying or taking away that choice that has been given to us. And this is what has held many of the thinkers throughout the time, as I will show you later. Alienation. Alienation is another theme which talks about how individual human beings have to alienate themselves from structures or from other human beings in the process of giving meaning to their life or their existence, because existentialists push the point that an individual is a unique being, and the reason that they are unique is that everyone's essence is highly personal, and this personalization of our essence requires us to alienate ourselves from other people or institutions so that we can derive a truly unique meaning to ourselves. And some people may not do this and just take on the meaning given by other social institutions, which existentialists say is fine. But what it says is that there's a sense of alienation if you truly go after the meaning of who you are. And it also says that the alienation of those who do not identify with the institutions of their own society, who find their society empty and meaningless. Meaning to say, if you're a true existentialist, you would try to alienate yourself, at least temporarily, to find true meaning to your existence. So this picture, if you look at it, gives you a sense of sorrow, a sense of alienation. And existentialists say that to truly give meaning to your life, you need to alienate yourself from all other humans, from human institutions, which could be religion, from the past, from the future. We only exist right now, right here. And like I said in the slide of death, many of the existentialist thinkers, the only reason they were able to survive World War II, because most of them were Jews and underwent the Nazi oppression, was because they understood that death was inevitable, and to commit suicide, for example, as a form of escapism would only mean that they would take away that only choice they have of them. Viktor Frankl, for example, said that though he is stripped of all dignity, though he's stripped of everything he has, his family, the only thing that they cannot strip him of is his own freedom to have his own freedom to define who he is as an individual. And this understanding that you exist right now, right here, in the way you are, and that you still have the ability to make a choice to define who you are, is what kept these thinkers going forward. And Frankl, for that example, didn't want to take on that identity given to him by the Nazis, but he took on a sense of identity given to him by his own self, and that is what helped him go forward, which we will see in his famous book, Man's Search for Meaning. So, to review everything that we've said, and as an amalgamation of all the themes within existentialism, what it says is, an existentialist believes that a person's life is nothing but the sum of the life he has shaped for himself. At every moment, it is always his own free will choosing how to act. He is responsible for his actions, which limit future actions. Thus, he must create a morality in the absence of any known predetermined absolute values. God does not figure into the equation, because even if God does exist, he does not reveal to men the meaning of their lives. Honesty with oneself is the most important value. Every decision must be weighed in light of all the consequences of that action. Life is absurd, but we engage it. Just to highlight, I have put the important points in red, which is that the life we have, or the meaning to the life we have, is given by an individual themselves, who has the free will to choose how to act and the meaning they give their lives, is responsible for those choices. The world is absurd because we create the morality in absence of any known predetermined absolute values, and honesty with oneself is of important and paramount worth. So, if you didn't understand anything that I have said so far, I hope that's not the case, then existentialism is simply this. It is a philosophy concerned with finding self and the meaning of life through free will, choice, and personal responsibility.